Thank you so much for coming back. You are a phenomenal human being. I read your first book, devoured it, and then couldn't believe what you just wrote. I was like, I can't believe somebody not only had the thought to do this, but someone like you, someone with your intention, compassion, your life's work, it lands in such an incredible way. So thank you for putting this book in the world.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having me again. So thank you as well.
So I feel like we as human beings, we see so much further with our eyes closed than with our eyes open. And we believe so much in so many things we've made meaning of that aren't even real. And then along comes someone like you and says, maybe I could point you over here, and maybe there is ease and magic available to you. Tell me about this book and this buzzword manifestation. It's so loaded for people. So unpack, first of all, what does that mean to you to manifest in your life?
Sure. Well, all of us have desires or goals or motivations. And the key is, and maybe also the word intentions, but really the key is how do we make those happen?
Right.
And all of us are trying to do that. Some of us, the average person does it by simply saying, I want this to happen. And many just leave it at that. Then there's a subset of people who have been exposed to books like The Secret, or what I would call the prosperity gospel, which I think, unfortunately, utilizes a narrative that manifestation should allow you to be selfish. And what I mean by that is the way it's promoted, it's I want, I want, I want, I want. And I think, frankly, that's one of the first mistakes of this narrative. The way we have evolved as a human species and the way we thrive is actually connection to others, frankly, if you want to use the term compassion, alleviating the suffering of others, being present for others. And when we do that, many positive things happen to us. So it's like a virtuous cycle. And when we care for others, when we're compassionate, our physiology works at its best.
Mm.
When we're selfish, when we're self-focused, when we want, when we feel entitled, oftentimes this doesn't stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, or the system of generosity and thoughtfulness towards others, but actually can stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, where there's a feeling of scarcity, of want, of need. And of course, that has all sorts of negative physiologic effects. So I would suggest to you that making your intentions manifest is not that simple. And if you want to have them have the opportunity to maximally manifest, you should avoid the narrative of I want versus what can I do for you? And that's part of the problem. And in fact, the first sentence of the book is the universe doesn't give a fuck about you. And that means because the universe has no fucks to give. It's all a power within yourself. And so many people, one, they look outward for some sort of external affirmation. But two, when they do that, they give away their self-agency. You fundamentally are the universe, and you have so much more control over your mind. But what you need to understand is, how do you maximize that control? And as I pointed out, it's when your perception changes from one of what I want to one of how can I be of service? And the confusion for so many people is that they have been lured into a false narrative of what defines success by the nature of our Western capitalist society, which is I want a lot of money, I want a powerful position, I want to be a celebrity or an influencer or X, Y, or Z, believing that by getting that status, all of these people are going to tell you how great you are, and that will fill the void that all of us humans have. And the problem is that void can only be filled by connection with others, being of service to others. And you get all the other associated benefits, but if your focus is wrong from the start, one, it will impede that progress and diminish the likelihood of you manifesting the things that you need. And you notice I say the difference between what you want and what you need. Young people especially want stuff, but it's from a very, I hate to say, a base of lack of knowledge, not that they shouldn't want things for themselves, but it's a completely different narrative because most of us early on in our lives don't understand the difference between what we want and what we need.
It's so powerful, and my body, even I can feel just like the ease that comes over me as you remind all of us of this really beautiful truth, which is that we are really much more inclined to truly crave the connection more than our mind thinks it's about piles of things. I think maybe for anyone who hasn't read your Into the Magic Shop, it might be helpful. And I'm actually curious about you sharing, because in that book, you talk about learning how to turn thoughts into things. And then you talk about getting all of the things on that list, like your capacity to move into a coherence that allowed you to create from thoughts, from intention. And then realizing you had much deeper dreams than the things on the list. Can you talk about that? Because what you just shared, you've lived that experience. You walked that journey, and that might be helpful context.
Sure. As you know from the first book, and for those who perhaps have not read it, I grew up in poverty. My father was an alcoholic. My mother had had a stroke when I was a child and was partially paralyzed, had a seizure disorder, became chronically depressed, attempted suicide multiple times. We were on public assistance. We had been evicted from different residences. And of course, this is not the environment typically associated with success of a child for the future. And in fact, there's something called adverse childhood experiences, where some of these types of events, if you add them up, that number you get decreases the likelihood of any type of success in life. Alcoholism or drug abuse, mental illness, poverty, etc. What happened to me that changed the trajectory of my life, which is actually something that none of us should ever forget, and that is interacting with somebody who cares, who understands your suffering or the pain you're in, or intuits that, and then takes the time to offer to help. And what happened to me was when events would occur at my house that were uncomfortable, fighting, my father coming in drunk, etc., I would frequently get on my bicycle and ride as far and as fast as I could away from the situation. And on one of those journeys, I rode my bike by a strip mall in which there was a magic shop, and I had had an interest in magic. So I went into the shop, and there was a woman there, and I'm sure you've met people like this, they have a radiant presence about them. They have this amazing smile, and you immediately feel comfortable. And the reason is because they are non-judgmental. They're accepting you. They're not looking at you in the context of who are you or how important you are. They're simply connecting with you as a fellow human being. And that's what this woman, whose name was Ruth, did. And it turned out she was the owner's mother. She knew nothing about magic, but we engaged in a conversation for about 20 minutes. And after that, she said something like, geez, I really like you. I'm here for another 6 weeks. If you show up every day, I think I could teach you something that could really help you. And that began a journey which did change the trajectory of my life, but it also made me realize that at that young age, probably I didn't have the self-awareness or insight to really fully understand the messages she gave me. Now, certainly, one of the things she taught me was some aspects of mindfulness, which is a body relaxation technique, as well as the ability to focus, in this case, using a candle, which allows you to be present, and also to not respond to the negative dialogue that goes on in so many of our heads. And that combination of events created a calmness and a stability and the ability to be present, which changed everything. But the most important aspect of that was the last part, which was a manifestation technique. And as a child of 12 at the time, and of course, growing up in poverty or feeling deprived, I wanted what I thought translated into the opposite. And so I wanted $1 million. I wanted to live in a mansion. I wanted a Porsche. I wanted a Rolex watch. And I did get every one of those things. But the point I missed was exactly what I was talking about earlier. It was I want. I didn't understand what I needed or what would fill the emptiness that so many of us have in our lives. As an example, if you speak to a lot of young people and you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's often not, I want to be a doctor and help people. It's, I want to be a celebrity. I want to be wealthy. I want to be an influencer, with a naive belief that by doing so, you get external affirmation that's going to make you feel okay and make you feel whole. And unfortunately, this is a sad narrative that has been promulgated by modern Western society, that success translates into those things: power, position, money. And once you achieve those, you will be happy. And having achieved great success by those definitions, I was never more unhappy than any time in my life. And it was only after I went through the dot-com crisis, where I lost about $78 million in 6 weeks and had to go through a period of reflection. And it was during that period of reflection that I sort of understood what I had missed. And even though I had become a doctor and I helped people, my focus, though, still was trying to overcome the insecurities and the shame, which was a result of the baggage that I had carried through my childhood. And it was only after I went through that experience and reflected. And also, it was interesting because after losing all that money, I'd borrowed $15 million to buy a penthouse and a villa in Florence and sports cars. When you owe somebody $15 million, they get very interested in you, how you're going to pay that back. So my best friends became my banker and my lawyer. And the interesting thing in regard to the lawyer situation was that I had made some commitments to charity, and I had no funds to live up to those commitments. And it turned out that I had filled out a bunch of paperwork related to stock that I had in a company that hadn't gone public. And I was going to give that away. And the lawyer informed me that they had actually never filed the paperwork and I didn't have to give any of that stock away. But after this period of reflection and realizing it wasn't about me, that that had not made me happy, it was when I made a decision to go ahead and surrender. And what I mean by that is not be attached to that money, orienting my life towards being of service and caring for others. And that's when everything changed. Now, you can imagine, though, when I made that decision, I was $3 million in the negative. And it turned out that that gift I just gave ended up being worth $30 million. But the key about that is, though, imagine what it felt like, though, to set up health clinics all over the world and blood banks, to set up programs for children affected by AIDS, HIV, or programs for the disabled. And I had the opportunity also to give back in the context of the medical school that accepted me, where I endowed the dean's chair following Hurricane Katrina. And this was at Tulane in New Orleans, which was devastated. And I rebuilt the library. And I tell people I went from rags to literal riches, then I went to rags, but I ended up getting incredible riches in a different way. As an example, I just mentioned some of them to you, but I also founded a center that studies the neuroscience of compassion, empathy, and altruism that has had literally an impact on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the world. The Dalai Lama is the founding benefactor. He became my friend, and I became chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation. Through that connection, I have met many, if not most, of the living spiritual and religious leaders in the world, including Pope Francis, Desmond Tutu, Thich Nhat Hanh, Solgo Rinpoche, Amma, the Hugging Saint, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, Sadhguru, Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Werner Erhard. And I don't say that to brag, I simply say that imagine what an amazing, extraordinary gift it is to be friends with, a confidant of, an advisor of some of the greatest living spiritual leaders in the world, and how much being in their presence gives you this incredible gift of insight into what does matter. If you look at every one of these individuals, it's not the text that's most important to them. It is what the fundamental message is, which is that what defines our humanity is compassion, caring for others, alleviating the suffering of others. And when we do that, the void, which I alluded to, is no longer a void. It is bursting with incredible love that sets your physiology in its best position. You thrive, you flourish. You're not diminished, you're not weak, you're not afraid anymore.
It's so beautiful. After college, I went to Jerusalem and I wound up staying there for 3 years. And I met this very holy rabbi who lives with his wife and their many children in the old city. And I said to him, after being being there for a few weeks, I said, "What's the most spiritual experience I can have while I'm here?" And he said, "Okay, you ready? So I want you to go down this street. You're gonna make a left. There's a blue door, and this is the address. You're gonna knock on this door." And I'm like, "Oh, what is it gonna be in there? Is there like a waterfall, a shrine?" Like, he goes, "There's a woman there. She's a widow. I want you to offer to do her dishes." And I just started to cry because I got it. He goes, I think that's the most spiritual experience you could have today. Go do that.
No, I think that's actually a very moving, profound story, because is what it's about. You know, we get so lost in our ego sometimes and have this false narrative that we're important. And you have to understand everyone's important. And you have to, and this is, I think, the highest level of spiritual elevation, is you see the other as yourself.
You talk about in this book, because this is your field, you understand the science, the neuroscience. You talk about what happens to our brain when there's attention, actual attention, and visualization and meditation and compassion, and how that changes the brain. That's such a giant topic, but can you just touch on that? Because it's so powerful to understand that it literally changes our physical brain.
No, probably to give the best analogy is that is easy for people to understand is, of course, there are parts of the brain that are associated with being kind, compassionate, empathetic, etc. But to have individuals understand an analogy that may be more relative is, if you are a violin player, which means you need to use your hands frequently, through practice, repetition, what happens is those areas of the brain that are associated with your hands dramatically increase in size. And the same is true when you do different types of mind training or meditative or mindfulness practices. Those parts of your brain that are associated with caring, concern, love are stimulated and grow in size. And in some ways, it actually, the more you do it, the more this strengthens the wiring and those areas enlarge. And it also makes it easier to live in that space because you become habituated to those types of behaviors, and they make you feel good. They feel that emptiness. And in fact, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about walking meditation. But what it means is that you can have this attitude in every activity you do in life. You don't have to sit on a mat to get there. You just have to change your reference point. And there are, interestingly, these different parts of our brains that are associated, if you will, with manifesting. One is something called the default mode network. The other is the salience network, the attentional network, and the executive control network. And the manner in which these collaborate dynamically result in us shaping our thoughts, our behaviors, our experiences, and result actually in the greatest likelihood for us to manifest our intentions.
Because I read your first book, and because I've been studying this for a long time from different angles, I get that. I think listeners are still really fuzzy about how the heck can you set an intention and make it manifest. In the book, you have a topic where you talk about how to release expectations and open yourself up to magic. I think that might be something you could speak to now, which kind of helps to close that loop. So what does that mean, to release expectations and then you open yourself up to magic? How is that related?
Sure. Well, I think part of the problem is that people, when you get attached to a goal or an endpoint, it does actually several things. Some of them are good. Obviously, having a goal that you set for yourself is important. And that's how we all achieve different things in our lives. The problem is when that becomes so dominant in your thought processes that it, in fact, impedes you. And what I mean by that is that, first of all, the majority of our suffering is caused by attachment and craving. And whether we like it or not, that is just the way it is. And so you have to be able to let go of that absolute focus, in the sense that, yes, you will meet people who say, I abandoned everything to achieve the goal, but look what they abandoned. I abandoned my family. I abandoned relationships. I abandoned any type of pleasure. I got to my goal. Well, okay. And for a subset of people, maybe that is the most important thing. You abandon everything because you have this centered purpose that you're living for. Uh, yes, but that comes at an incredible, incredible cost. And one of the costs is that the reality is what makes a life, and actually what's associated with longevity, isn't the goal, it's the journey, it's the path, because that is where human connection occurs. And if you're so focused on one thing and you dismiss all of that, you are dismissing one of the most powerful things possible, not only to increase your health, but to increase the joy and satisfaction and awe of living in this world. And so there has to be a balance, and you have to understand uh, what fills the void that every one of us has. And what many people don't appreciate is it's not the acquisition of things, it's not the acquisition of titles, it's not the acquisition of money, it's the acquisition of human connection. And it is that which makes our physiology work its best. It's that which makes us feel good. And all the other stuff, yes, it may have some component, but unless you orient yourself that way, uh, you're not going to reach the highest level of human flourishing and thriving, I don't believe. And it's also understanding how these brain networks process this information. And what I describe in the book, which is a 6-step program, it's not to diminish what has been learned, if you will, experientially about manifestation. It's to completely change the narrative about why you're doing it, as promulgated by The Secret, but also how do you maximize it by utilizing the lessons that I taught and understanding how to embed information into your subconscious that maximizes the ability to manifest your intention.
Do you have 2 more minutes, or do you have to go right now?
We can talk just forever. Just to be with you is such a blessing and a joy.
That means so much to me. Thank you. I feel this exact same way. Emma, just tell my next person, I have a meeting. Tell them I'll be 5 minutes late. So it's all so exquisite, and it's a reminder that all the abundance is here. It's always here. And it's always in our connection. And that connection is always available. You talk about in the book how to learn an inner language free from negativity. And I feel like so much of this is the racket, the racket in the mind, all those thoughts. It's like a blizzard of lies. And even if we hear a conversation like this and we don't just hear it, we feel it, it's impossible not to feel the words that you speak because they're so loving and they're so embodied. Because those thoughts, as they're just so automatic. It's so important that you mention this in the book. How do we learn an inner language that's free of that negative loop?
Well, I first want to say that the reason we have these negative thoughts is sort of a mess up in our threat system, where we translate things that we may that may not actually represent threat, but we translate them to that. And then, as you know, our sympathetic nervous system, as well as our parasympathetic nervous system, have evolved over millennia, if not millions of years. And you don't change it, in 100 years or 1,000 years or 5,000 years. It's very slow. So modern society, or society itself, evolves rapidly, but our genetics do not. But so it's understandable why it is essentially impossible to get rid of every negative comment that you have about yourself, although I'm sure there are probably Tibetan Buddhist monks who've spent many years in a cave who perhaps have been able to do that. But for the average person, generally that's not possible. So what we try to do is to turn the volume of that negativity down so low that it's simply background static. And we embody then the positive narrative, which is, I am worthy, I deserve love, it is possible. Because the brain doesn't have the ability to distinguish between what is and what is a possibility. So if you tell yourself, I am not worthy, it is not possible, by definition, that becomes your reality. So you have to repeatedly, and what I try to do, and again, it's not 100%, but what I try to do is when I have a negative thought, I immediately replace it. I don't even let the thought continue on. I say something positive. Sadly, so many people are more hypercritical of themselves than anyone else in their lives. And
Yes.
that is what limits so many people. And what they don't appreciate is so many people give their agency away because they're so desirous of positive affirmation, but its external affirmation does not ever deal with that emptiness. The only way you can deal with it is, one, to understand that you are worthy, that it is possible. And that actually brings the power back to you. As an example, through this new book, you go through these 6 steps and you are returning the power to yourself. You are controlling your agency. You know, what's so sad is somebody will say, I'm so excited because I am going to become a doctor, or I'm so excited because I'm going to get this new job. And then even their relatives or best friends would go, no, that's not possible. You're not going to be able to do that. And everyone has experienced this, and it's so sad.
Yeah.
Because what you should be saying is, yes, of course you are, because you're great and you're fantastic. But the other side of that is you actually have to firmly believe that, because so many of us don't appreciate the power that we have within ourselves to change our story.
It's all just so beautiful. When people read this book, if there's something that they take away and you had to kind of free associate and boil it down to like, what do you want to be lasting? What do you want the imprint to be once they read this book? What comes up?
Well, I think there are 2 things. One I was just mentioning, you have more power than you can possibly imagine within yourself. 2, that the greatest gift you can give yourself is actually being of service to others. And several studies have demonstrated this reality over and over, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical health. Caring for others is the absolute most powerful action we can do in our lives. And that will give us true meaning, which is not the transitory happiness of something, getting something, or achieving this goal that you're absolutely focused on, but you will get long-lasting happiness, deep happiness, profound happiness. And that's associated with being of service and caring for others and giving love unconditionally, accepting everyone, understanding that even though someone has made a mistake, uh, that doesn't make somebody bad. All of us have made mistakes. We just have to sit there and be a vessel of love to them.
Okay, my last question, this is what's coming up just because I hear it so often, which is I have most of the women, most of my audience are women who are really kind and compassionate. And where they struggle is they feel depleted because there's this people-pleasing, over-functioning, codependent part. And it starts to not feel great. And the balance is everything you just said is the truth. That's what's in the Wizard of Oz. Like, if he has anything to offer it, that's it, what you just said. And yet, if you're out of alignment and you're codependent and you don't fill your cup and you don't have authentic, coherent energy, it's something's just wrong with how that starts to feel. And so if somebody is compassionate and they want to be truly happy, which means to have a meaningful life, but they're wrestling with this pattern of just not having a self and being totally depleted, how do you reconcile how to go back to being in service and then knowing that you can do this from a place where it's clean? It's not coming from a self that is just constantly over functioning. I mean, that is not actually healthy, right? And it's not what I perceive, the journey of Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama to be about. I feel like there's like a real authentic like state of being, right? And even in yourself. So how can we make meaning of those two things?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one that challenges so many people. In some ways, it's analogous to why a lot of people become doctors. They're so giving; they want to help everybody. But the reality is, one, you have to be self-aware, and what I mean by that is, all of us have had baggage that we carry with us. Now, for many people, it's extraordinarily positive. But a subset of people, that baggage has created a narrative that you're not worthy, and that the only way you are worthy is that you sacrifice yourself for other people.
Right.
That is not the same as
Right.
being of service,
Right.
because when you sacrifice yourself, you're not being of service. One, you're punishing yourself because you have a narrative that says, well, maybe they'll like me if I just do this, if I sacrifice everything for them. And of course, that does not work. And we see, unfortunately, so many people who don't have the self-awareness that the drivers of codependent behavior, the drivers of sacrificing yourself, have nothing to do with the present moment. It's the suffering that you're carrying, the baggage that you're carrying, that dictates your relationships. It dictates the job you pick. It dictates the daily interactions. And it's not about that moment. So one of the keys is having this self-awareness and to gain insight into what are the drivers of your behavior. And, again, as I was telling you, I have spent a lot of time examining my own drivers and realized how they were actually an impediment or negative to me. I think the other thing is you have to actually focus on self-care. Being of service doesn't mean you sacrifice yourself. The way to be best in terms of being of service is to take care of yourself. And part of that is being self-compassionate. Part of it is taking the time for yourself to recharge your batteries,
Yeah.
to be with people who give you positive affirmation and support, who you can sit there and go to and say, you know, I have so much stuff going on. I'm exhausted. I really need a break. Can you help me? Versus, you know, as an example, in the medical profession, doctors are terrified to say, I can't do something or I'm tired because they feel they're going to be judged. And a lot of people feel that if they show what they perceive as weakness, that's negative and they're going to be rejected. And frankly, it's just not true. In almost every situation, I won't say 100%, if you authentically express your needs, actually, there are people who will step forward and help you. And if they don't, then that's also a sign that perhaps you need to reassess who your friends are, or who your partner is. All of us are frail, fragile human beings, most of who are trying to do the best they can. And this isn't a contest to see how much you can beat yourself up. Frankly, it's a contest to see how much you can love yourself, which allows then for you to be your best self. And I think that's really the key point. So you should not be afraid to say you're tired. You should not be afraid to say, I need time for myself. You should not be afraid to say, I've been in this relationship, I've given so much, and I am not feeling as if I am getting what I need, and not be afraid to leave that relationship. Now, I'm not trying to make things super simple because there are all sorts of issues that make some of these statements not possible to achieve at that moment, whether there's children involved, money issues, et cetera, et cetera. But I do believe that you can, within yourself, manifest a set of circumstances which will allow you to be able to deal with many of these issues so that you can care for yourself, but you can also be of service to others.
I lied. I have one more question.
Okay,
My
one more.
last question is, there is clearly all of the essence of what we want to actually have in this world is like everything you said, and people in the blue zones have this, right? They're so abundant with connection. That's why they're having such longevity. Like they have all the real stuff. And also, do you see there's some blessing or benefit to manifesting and stewarding wealth so that you can rebuild a library, so that you can build those hospitals that help people? Do you feel like there's a balance to how that can be a good thing to intend to manifest?
Sure. Now, what I would say though is, again, like so many things, there has to be balance. As an example, there are some people who say, well, the reason I am ruthlessly making money is so I can help people in the future. So, you know, you've resulted in 100,000 people losing their jobs, many of them being on welfare. And yes, you made a ton of money so you can help people. That is not a good thing. And so deluding yourself that somehow by ruining people's lives, that you're have this extended practice that's going to save you from going to hell, which is usually the motivator for people doing things at the end of their lives, is wrong. Uh, uh, that's not to say that there's nothing wrong with accumulating wealth and sharing that wealth, but it's
Right.
not a game of, I'm not going to share a penny until I get to be worth $2 billion. Then I'm going to be generous. I will assure you, unfortunately, what happens to many, many people, and again, I'm not trying to make a broad generalization because I'll get an email from a billionaire who says, I'm one of the nicest people, damn it, I've given away 99% of my money. Yes, and I appreciate that, and I'm not the determinant of whether that's right or wrong. But good for you that you've done that. But you represent probably 0.001% of that subset of people. As an example, who needs, as we see it among some of the top 2 or 3 wealthiest people in the world, 100 or 200 or 300 billion dollars? What is that?
I don't know. Yeah.
And what are you going to do with that? You're making
Right.
so much
Oh
money
my God.
because these people have access to information the average person does not have. They move markets. So they're not making maybe the 5 or 10% that an average person makes. They're literally making 30, 40, 50% of their money every year. This is why you can see somebody like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, they start at, 2 or 4 billion, and suddenly they're up to 200 billion. And the thing though is that, yes, you'll see somebody say, well, I gave away $1 billion. Well, yeah, I mean, look, if you're worth 100 or 200 billion, you're making 5 or 6 or 10 billion a year. You're not doing anything. I mean, yes, it's having an impact,
Right.
but look at what you could be having. And this is part of the problem is they want to be judged on a scale that
Right.
would seem extraordinary to the average person, but is meaningless in the context of how they live their lives. And who needs 10, $20 million mansions? Who needs a $300 million
No one
yacht?
is the answer.
And
No,
they sit there empty.
I heard Shaq recently he said, I have a 100,000 square foot house and I live in it alone. It's very sad, he said. But no, what I'm dealing with is more the women who come to me are, let's say they've been scraping by making $65,000 while paying for their kids' college, and they're exhausted and they feel guilty about wanting to make $150,000 or whatever it is. And I say to them, you're not hurting someone else if you're thriving and able to really just live normally. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a real shame in, well, I mean, why shouldn't I just be happy with being a nurse and making nothing? And then after I pay for everything that I need, it's like, you don't have to do that. Right. I mean, I don't, and I think that's the population that I'm dealing with.
Sure. Well, again, is the question, should they feel guilty about wanting more? Is that the question?
Well, it's like, can we manifest? Because if you're already serving, right? You're teaching, you're working in your church, whatever it is, and then you feel guilty, like, I guess this is just it. And then I'm hearing I should just do more service. It makes you feel like, why should I manifest? Why should I use the magic to manifest more wealth? And their wealth would be being able to, live a little bit nicer so that they can eat better or take better care of their family.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things here.
Yeah.
There's until you have stability in the sense of food, shelter, security, etc., it's hard to think about anything other than survival. And so wanting to be in a stable situation, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that's a necessity of living in the Western world or living probably anywhere. The sad thing, though, of course, living in the Western world is many, 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 many times more expensive.
It's true.
And sadly, people come from third world countries who believe that the West is lined with bars of gold, and they're going to come here and live in that mansion or drive the fancy car. And they quickly realize that they end up being at the very lowest level of the hierarchy, and oftentimes are living worse than they were in their home country, which is a very sad statement. But again, there should be no guilt with wanting to live a more prosperous life. And yes, in sense of, well, I have to give everything away or I have to be of service, I'm not really saying that at all. What I'm saying, though, is that you also can't think, oh, okay, well, I'm going to create a narrative where I take this and I take that, and then I do this and I make more money, and and you're screwing somebody else to do X, Y, or Z, and that's not going to be helpful or productive for you in terms of your psyche or your future or the sustainability of it. But that being said, if you are doing things, and I won't say selfishly because it's not selfish. It's like self-care. If you're doing things that allow you to mentally be healthier, feel better about yourself, and also fulfill the goals of caring for your family and children or just yourself, then that's extraordinarily important, because not doing that, you're not creating the environment to thrive. So it's not as if I'm telling anyone, and I don't want anybody to misinterpret that somehow you take everything you have and just throw it out there and say, here it is, world, take this, take everything from me. I'm lying here naked, hungry, and starving, and exposed to the elements. But geez, I sure feel better about it. I mean, there may be some people who do that, and it's true, but I think the most important thing is self-care. Otherwise, you can't care for other people.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's such an important conversation, and I think the most important thing though is we didn't come to the world for a pile of stuff. We came for much bigger dreams, and this book is so beautiful, and it makes you feel abundant immediately because it rewires you to see what's already here, what you can cash in on in spades, which is generosity of heart and connection. And it's gorgeous. And I'm so glad you wrote it.
Well, thank you so much. And again, know that I hope what's really interpreted by this book is that you do have the power to change your circumstance and also benefit yourself as well as others. And also the reality that when we talk about being of service, it's not just about giving stuff away, or it's about sometimes simply smiling at somebody, sometimes opening a door, sometimes buying a person a meal. All of these acts, many of them don't cost anything other than just having an openness about you.
Beautiful. Tell everybody where they can they already pre-order it now?
Yes. So at pretty much any of the typical booksellers, I hate to say Amazon for all sorts of reasons, but yes, it's readily available, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it's helpful. So
That's
thank you so
awesome.
much, Cathy. You take care. Go answer
you.
the call that you were probably
Thank you.
supposed to be
Bless
at.
you. You're such a light. Thank you so much for being you.
Okay. Much
Okay.
love to you.
Okay, bye, honey.